Similarly to how in the center of a donut there's a hole, and sometimes you realize there's another hole in its hole, at the center of each Knives Out film, even beyond the immediately observable commentary, there's a deeply moving sentiment that in two of the films, sorry, Glass Onion, always brings me to tears at the emotional climax, and I just want to take a moment to appreciate that Rian Johnson has created a completely original series that cleverly modernizes the whodunit genre and feels like one of the rare original franchises that people almost unanimously adore, and they're all good to great. Again, sorry, Glass Onion. Johnson says a lot in the press that his vision for these was to be unapologetically contemporary. He's adhering to many classic whodunit tropes and trademarks of the genre, but he's created a new iconic detective in our era with social media and current politics, etc. And I love how Benoit Blanc feels like an anachronistic presence who's merely an observer to the pathetic woes of society. But this is the first Knives Out film that actually has a defined arc for Blanc, and it's part of what makes Wake Up Dead Man easily the most thoughtful and complex, but also personal of these so far. And I'm so excited to break it down with you guys. This is going to be a spoiler-filled video. You have been warned. If you haven't seen Wake Up Dead Man yet, you kind of have to, and there's no excuse now because it's on Netflix as of today, December 12th, so make sure to watch it and come back after and let me know your thoughts. But I have to admit, I was a little wary in the first 15 minutes or so of this. I was like, oh no, is the whole bit haha, priests are swearing. And then we get the whole 5G right-wing grifter scene with Cy Draven, and I do think Johnson can overplay the politics stuff a little from time to time, but luckily it wasn't what I feared. I settled into it so quickly, and it's so fun that you hardly even notice that Benoit Blanc doesn't show up until, I don't know, 40 minutes in or whenever it is that he shows up. Josh O'Connor really sort of steals the show here and carries it so gracefully while it's just him. This is going to be the most eyes that have ever been on Josh O'Connor in a leading role, and I have no doubt that people are going to absolutely adore him who aren't familiar with his work already in films like Challengers, La Chimera, and The Mastermind. It's also a great introduction for him to have leading up to his role in Spielberg's next film, and his performance is able to make such a huge impact here because he's easily the most complex sidekick that we've had for Blanc yet. He's an ex-boxer who killed a man in the ring, not by accident, but with hate in his heart. We know he has this edge to him. We see it come out at certain times, but he has made the conscious decision to course correct and go on a different path. He perfectly balances not only those elements, but a more physical comedic performance, which he's so good at, with great moments of emotion, guilt, anger, and they don't detract from one another. I also want to shout out Bridget Everett because together they have maybe the best scene in the film where Father Judd is on the phone with Louise, the woman who works at the construction company or whatever it is, and Father Judd realizes just how obsessed he becomes with the murderer and has forgotten to be a priest. The whole cast is great, but I do think this is the Knives Out film where the supporting cast, here being the flock of churchgoers, is the most underutilized, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, but I personally really loved Josh Brolin. I feel like his performance isn't getting a ton of recognition, but man, he is like scary and intimidating as this fire and brimstone preacher, and he's being looked at as a Trump analog, and yeah, like if the shoe fits and all of that, and the shoe definitely fits, but I didn't see that or feel that as the sole intention here. I think that Johnson has his own mission with his relationship to faith and when it can be taken to the extreme like this, and it just so happens that there can be a lot of Trump types found in positions of leadership like this. But even if some of that is more on the nose, as I said, all three Knives Out films have had a really moving emotional climax and foundational political reckoning. The first film having Marta absolved of her guilt as Blanc tells her that she's a good nurse and was not responsible for Harlan's death, which is especially meaningful considering her identity as an immigrant in that environment. Glass Onion has a black woman reclaiming her sister's intellectual property from Edward Norton's Elon Musk stand-in, but I think that Wake Up Dead Man has the most profound example of this, not only as Glenn Close's Martha confesses to what she did, but how Benoit Blanc allows allows her to do it. Again, this is the first time we've really seen Blanc have a full character arc, and it's born from his dynamic with Father Judd. Their very first scene together is a debate about faith, where Blanc has an obvious venom in how he talks about it, briefly saying that his mom, who he didn't have a great relationship with, died recently and was very religious. We also know from the second film that Blanc is a queer man, which potentially adds another layer to his personal relationship to organized religion. Father Judd has his road to Damascus moment after talking to Louise on the phone. Again, incredibly moving scene, and it is of course a testament to Judd's dedication as a priest and the person that he's become, but it's also the first time that we've seen someone stand up to Blanc like this and critique how obsessed he is with the game and solving these crimes to the point that it can influence the people around him and might even be a bit self-serving, even if it ultimately brings justice. I don't think this would all be nearly as impactful if it came before the third film in the series, after we've gotten to know Benoit Blanc. And of course, Daniel Craig is as fantastic in this as ever, and I love his hair in this one. He looks amazing. And finally, the arc comes full circle in the final moments with Glenn Close, where Blanc pauses his grand summation of the crime, which he's been hyping up the whole film, just to afford her the grace to confess to what she had done, which Father Judd has inspired in him. I love how the Grace storyline culminates, beginning as this fable about the harlot whore, the initial flashback presenting Grace one way, in an admittedly really epic sequence that reminded me of Black Narcissus, where she has this demonic look, to Kerry Washington's character Vera, another woman, being the one to question that narrative and say, that poor girl, to finally Glenn Close repeating those same words as her dying words, and the flashback being shown in a new context, finally releasing what doubles as religion being weaponized as a tool to oppress, and the flames of internalized misogyny that are only stoked by that hateful way of thinking. I seriously think it's so good. Like, a lot of political commentary can be almost unfeeling because it's become so contentious and it's often about asserting superiority more than anything else. So I was so moved by this moment from Johnson of just naked humanity and empathy, this sentiment of breaking through our biases and just not holding on to hate. I mean, you can literally see Martha holding on until she finally sees it. And I thought it was just so beautiful. And then it just gets even better when Father Judd renames the church Our Lady of Perpetual Grace from Our Lady of Perpetual Fortitude, the ultimate change from this to this, and the Eve's apple being hidden away forever. It's so powerful how this all tries to break down those walls between the characters in the film, and I think it would be foolish for anyone to think that this film or Johnson was vehemently anti-religion or faith. He himself may not hold those beliefs anymore, and he talks about that a lot in the press, but the most relatable or maybe humanized new characters in the film were a priest and someone who is devoutly religious, and Blanc, who often feels like the clear Johnson analog and mouthpiece here, takes a lesson away that I think Johnson is trying to emphasize as a reconciliation between those with and without faith, this space between where we can all try to afford each other grace even when it's the most difficult to do so. Within reason, of course. I also want to say that all of the craft on display here is incredible, but I want to put extra emphasis on Steve Yedlin's cinematography. He has obviously worked with Rian Johnson quite a few times before, but the way that he uses light and shadow here to both reflect the emotional state of the characters and the religious themes is such a joy to watch. It's some of my favorite of the year. And despite everything I loved about this film, I do think that the mystery itself leaves a little bit to be desired, and it's interesting to see what people expect from and take away from the mysteries in these films, because Johnson has been criticized for the murderer in these being too obvious, but to me it's always been fine because there's like another layer that we couldn't have guessed that really ties it all together, whether it's the switch up with the morphine in the first film or the twin storyline in Glass Onion, and I found that element of it less satisfying here, while at the same time it feels like there's like one too many things going on. The Cy Draven character is really interesting to me because he obviously represents the political right and is trying to make a grift out of Monsignor Wick's cult of personality. it's all relevant and it fits really well thematically into the religious setting. So I think it might be the whole thing about him being Monsignor Wick's illegitimate son that I found superfluous, even if it needs to be there to tie some things together. I honestly sort of wished the Monsignor Wick's cult of personality thing was more relevant to the grander mystery, but that could also be because as soon as I saw the Lazarus tomb, I knew he was going to get resurrected, like Chekhov's tomb, but I thought he was going to fake his own death, so I was disappointed when I saw them flip his dead body like a pancake. That's a me issue. That's on me. But the reveal of Jeremy Renner I also thought was a bit underwhelming, probably because, again, the supporting cast just doesn't have a lot to do, and we aren't really given a lot in the way of a suspect list. Like in the first film, you don't really suspect a whole lot of them, but it's still fun because you get to see them all try to protect their secrets anyways. So I think the structure of the mystery here has some rough edges. It's missing that really satisfying connective tissue in some places, but it's good enough for me, and with how just truly wonderful and exciting I find Johnson's direction here with Faith and playing Blanc and Father Judd's characters off of each other, the Grace storyline, I'm coming out of this movie with a giant smile on my face, so I'm going to give Wake Up Dead Man 4 out of 5 stars. I personally still prefer the first one overall, but again, it's just so rewarding to see the characterization over the series and Johnson's thematic ambitions here pay off in, again, what is easily the most thoughtful and complex Knives Out film so far. So let me know your thoughts on Wake Up Dead Man, guys. Did you see it in theaters? Let me know if it was playing near you. How do you rank the movie so far? Do you want to see Rian Johnson do more of these? Don't forget to like and subscribe and keep an eye out for more videos soon. Thanks for watching.